Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for the National Review Facebook Live interview series. I'm Erica Anderson with National Review, and today we have someone on the show who has a very topical issue to discuss. We have the founder of New Wave Feminists, Destiny Herndon-DeLaRosa. Thanks for coming on, Destiny.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So let me just set it up a little bit so people know what we're discussing. So tomorrow, if you don't know, is the big day, Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C., and there is a march planned, a women's march on Washington, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is a kind of an anti-Trump situation.
Well, they're saying now that it's not. It initially, I believe, kind of started to be an
Mm-hmm.
anti-Trump rally because it is going to be the day after the inauguration. It's actually on Saturday.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. But it's for women's rights, right? Like it's a women's march for women to stand up against sexism, misogyny, and all, all good things in general. And it really is not a march that has anything to do with abortion specifically. But you guys had signed on as a sponsor of the march, and then it kind of came to light. I think a few of these big named folks on Twitter, Jessica Valenti comes to mind, had said, oh, this march is being sponsored by a pro-life group. Well, that's not what we stand for. And then before we knew it, you guys were taken off as a sponsor. Can you tell us kind of like the progression of getting signed on to it and then how that all kind of played out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we decided to march at the beginning of January that we were going to go there and represent the pro-life feminist contingent. At that point, the website still was pretty vague. It said, women's rights are human rights, and it talked a lot about inclusion and diversity and respecting each other's differences. So it was definitely something right up our alley. We felt like we would add a unique voice and perspective, and we were really looking forward to partnering with them. At the same time, there was an article that came out in a publication that said, pro-life women are not welcome at the Women's March because pro-life leaders had not been invited to participate. And it kind of made me chuckle because nobody was technically invited to participate. It's a march open to the public. So we had made a joke on our Facebook that, call us unladylike, but we don't need no stinking invitations. Like, we're feminists, and so we're going to be marching. But then someone pointed out that they actually have a partnership program. So it's not sponsoring, but it is partnering with them.
Okay.
And I figured, okay, this is kind of a chance to see if they really do want us to be welcomed into the fold. Again, we're going either way, but we went ahead and filled out the partnership application online. That included a bio. So we made it very clear, while we're pro-life, we do not work to make abortion illegal. We work to make it unthinkable and unnecessary because we support women so well that they wouldn't consider violence in the womb. And this is something that we made very clear. And then we pointed out some of the other issues that we, are against domestic abuse and human trafficking and all of these other issues that are common ground issues we can come together on. That we felt like would make us a really great partner. So when our partnership was accepted, I will say I was pleasantly surprised. Pro-life and feminism are two words that are very polarizing. So we definitely don't usually get invited to partner with stuff, which is unfortunate. So this was very, very cool. So we became partners. Our name went up on the site. They did send us kind of a form letter that said they were thrilled to be partnering with us. And we responded back and said, it was an honor to be partnering with them as well. Now, within the next few days, they added abortion explicitly as a platform. Prior to that, they had kind of tweaked the site and said, reproductive rights and, access to birth control and STD screenings and other stuff that, wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker to be working with a pro-life group. But then I think sometime over the weekend they added abortion. So come Monday, when the Atlantic piece came out praising them for including us, a bunch of pro-choice feminists were able to point to the fact that, in your platform you talk about abortion. So it's not okay to have pro-life women out there marching with us, and you need to remove them. And this is where I'm very empathetic to the organizers of the march. This is the first time they've done anything like this. And we're used to being trolled on Twitter and, having Twitter storms against us. So I don't know. It was disappointing that they didn't stand up to it and say, hey, this is about diversity and inclusion, and they bring a different perspective. but I understand. It certainly did not make us upset with the march in any way that they removed our name. We still plan on going. And if anything, we've certainly gotten a new spotlight on the concept of pro-life feminism, which has been really, really cool.
Yeah, it's so great because had this whole kind of drama not happened, you wouldn't be able to be speaking out on the news about this right now. And I think, honestly, the concept, like you said, of a pro-life feminist is something that a lot of people probably haven't heard of. And so that kind of leads me back to kind of a little bit more about your organization in particular. If you could just tell us, how did you get started? And I'm sure you thought long and hard about the name. How did you decide to go with that new wave feminist name? And just like, what is a feminist to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, a feminist to me, I subscribe to the consistent life ethic, which is I don't believe that any human should have violence perpetrated against them from the womb to the tomb. And as women, for far too long, we were treated as property. And so for us to now be treating our unborn children as property and deciding that they're disposable on a whim, whether we want them or we don't want them, that seems like a huge human rights violation to us. And so, the concept of pro-life feminism is we have earned our liberation. Now we need to be standing up for those who are the weakest and most vulnerable, which is the unborn child. And, when we look back in history and we see any group of people, any subset of the human family that has been dehumanized, and we've said they're not fully human, it never works out well for us. And of course, right now we're doing that with the unborn person. And so while ideologically, of course, we're anti-violence, we also realize that there's a practical element, which is we need to be supporting women so well that they would never turn to abortion. And this is something that I think we find a lot of common ground with pro-choicers on. A lot of times I think the pro-life movement uses pro-choice and pro-abortion as like these interchangeable terms. But I would say I know plenty of pro-choice people who don't support abortion. They understand it's a horrible option, but they believe that a woman should have the right to that, which I can understand. What we're saying is that let's talk about the women who feel like they have no other option, that they're going to be kicked out of the home or they don't have medical care. Any of these things that are standing in the way from them making life-affirming decisions, how do we reach them so they truly have a choice? Because it's not pro-choice when a woman feels forced into an abortion. And I think when we can all agree that surrounding that woman with enough support so that she can make life-affirming choices for herself and her child, that is an empowering message. And again, that's why I think New Wave Feminists would have been a wonderful fit for this march, because we do have such a common goal of just helping women and supporting them.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because actually on Facebook in the past couple of days, just with people on my page, trying to have respectful conversations with people, I've kind of been talking about this term pro-abortion, pro-life, anti-abortion, and all of that. And I found that a lot of my pro-choice friends, they reject that term pro-abortion. And I kind of said, I don't personally use that term because, I think it's a barrier of communication when you're trying to find common ground, because I don't think most people who are pro-choice are like, yeah, abortion is awesome. That's not the way that it is. And
it's just like, we don't want to be called anti-choice. I mean, we're not anti-choice. Right. We disagree with the one violent option.
Right, exactly. And I kind of explained that too. I was like, you guys don't like this term, we don't like this term. So let's all use like the respected terms, although in the press they refuse to use the word pro-life. I was reading an op-ed in the Washington Post today by a girl who had written about attending the march as a pro-lifer. And I actually heard from somebody that knew her that in her headline she had put pro-life and the Post had changed it to anti-abortion. And I say, yeah, I'm anti-abortion, but again, it gives a negative label.
I'll take anti-abortion. I'm not going to do anti-choice because I'm not anti-choice.
Yeah,
there's myriad choices that are non-violent choices, but sure, we're anti-abortion.
Right,
go for it. That can be common ground. But I agree. There are all these things that shut down communication, and ultimately, and I talked a little bit about this the other day on Fox and Friends. The idea that we're going to censor thoughts and beliefs and concepts and say that's an unpopular opinion, you're not allowed to have it. You can't sit at our table anymore. That's incredibly dangerous. And that's the very thing that I think a lot of political analysts are realizing now happened with the Trump administration. Everybody, was shocked by the election results because look at our polls. Like, clearly Donald Trump didn't have a chance. Well, if you would have talked to people and allowed them to actually express their thoughts and opinions, whether, rather than just saying, oh, they're stupid for voting for Trump, or, anybody who would vote for him is backwoods and racist and, sex offender or whatever else. I mean, no, there are some people. I road trip a lot because we speak at colleges. And so I go through these really small towns that are just a shell of what they used to be. And I can understand that the American people probably have a lot of frustration. Now, I was a never Trumper. For me, his rhetoric was a deal breaker. But I will say that I'm not going to assume just because you voted for Donald Trump, you are an evil or stupid or misogynistic person yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where we've missed a great opportunity for dialogue with the other side. So I really wish that the more progressive side would have learned from that. I myself am an independent, so I don't really have a dog in this hunt. But it would have been cool for them to include us and say, we disagree with your anti-abortion stance, but at the end of the day, tell us more about that. Tell us more about where you're coming from, and can we find common ground?
Right, exactly. I think that's just the right perspective to take. I wanted to ask you, just because you had mentioned it, the whole idea of not focusing on the legality of abortion. Are you not opposed, but you're just not interested in that fight? Is that what you're saying?
I think that laws follow culture. So I think where our culture's at right now, it would be very difficult to enforce a law that would make abortion illegal. And to me, all it would do is turn a lot of women into criminals. And I think that's kind of dangerous. Now, the unborn human being is a person that needs protection, but I think that my group focuses on humanizing the unborn in a different way besides just saying, my senator says.
Right. I totally, I'm with you on that, and I have always kind of veered more towards that. I don't want someone to feel like they have to make that choice because of a law, but I would rather them make that choice because they want to make that choice. And like you said, that they don't feel that they need to make another choice.
And if we understand that, the majority of women who are receiving abortion services, they don't want to be in that position either. I have always been pro-life, but I became pregnant with my son at 16 years old. And I can tell you, while I knew I was going to be having this child, I had this feeling overcome me that I wanted to rip my stomach off and run away from it. And so whatever you would call that, but I just, how have I made this choice that's led to this? And, the fear and panic that surrounded that moment of just, I need to be unpregnant. Now, because abortion wasn't an option for me, I knew that I had 9 months to figure out another course of action. And that's when I saw the myriad choices that I was talking about. Am I going to place him for adoption? Am I going to parent? If I do adoption, do I do a closed adoption? Do I do an open adoption? Am I going to have natural childbirth? Am I going to have it in a hot tub in my living room? There were so many options. And that's of course why I hate being called anti-choice or referred to as anti-choice. But for me, the fact that I didn't have this ticking clock in my head that was saying each week that passes, this is becoming more expensive. It's looking more like a baby. I had so many friends who became pregnant at the same time I did at 16, and seeing them choose abortion because they were scared and because there was just this cloud of chaos and noise around them forced me to look at what did I have that they didn't have. I was single. My boyfriend and I had split up, but I did have a support system in my family. They were willing to support me, whereas a lot of these girls didn't. They were actually going to lose their support system because they would be kicked out of their home and lose, their medical insurance, things like that. So that's what kind of drove me to this passion for helping women and making sure that they really know that they have pro-life choices. They have life-affirming options. And being able to give them the same support system in some way, even if it's just finding them community, finding them resources in their own area. Because believe it or not, so many people don't realize what's out there and what exists. And they don't know if the place that they're calling is, a pregnancy center or an abortion clinic. They're not sure. And so if we can get them the resources, there's a very good chance that they will end up making life-affirming choices.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you familiar with the organization Save the Storks?
Yes, with the sonogram.
Yes, I love them. They're like one of my favorite organizations. And one thing I learned from them, and maybe I should have known this, was that so many people are uninformed. Like you're saying, people do not realize all the options that they have. They don't realize how much help there is available. And so I love that message that you're putting out there. Just not
information is always powerful, and to me that is a
totally.
very feminist concept. Making sure that women have resources and knowledge, and unfortunately, sometimes we see feminists who will shoot down like a sonogram bill, for instance, because we're going to need to bring in fainting couches if a woman has to look at a sonogram. And to me, that's incredibly anti-feminist. The more we are educated on what's happening and what abortion actually is, the better. Where I kind of draw the line is when we are holding up images and screaming at women or shaming them. That's not productive. And having been in the situation of a crisis pregnancy myself, and knowing the fear and chaos in my own head, the best way that we as a pro-life community can support that woman is by running out that darkness and that fear and that panic with love and compassion and empathy and true life-affirming choices.
Let me ask you this. What were your thoughts on the Planned Parenthood videos last year? In my view, I do think that they kind of exposed a lot, and I know people that kind of did, in a way, change their mind about some things. Do you think that was a good thing? Was it helpful, or was it not helpful?
For me, it was something where I'm in it. I'm in the pro-life movement. I see the abortion victims all the time, the hands that are severed and everything else. Like, unfortunately, I've become very desensitized to those images. But watching these videos and hearing the abortion providers talk so callously about, making sure we get the calvarium intact, and we're going to change this procedure so that we can harvest more organs. It's one thing when you hear pro-life people saying this, and it's easy to write it off and say, oh yeah, they're just lunatic activists this is all propaganda. But when you actually hear the abortion industry workers themselves talking this way, I found that incredibly disturbing. And I broke down at one point and started crying when I watched one of the videos, which surprised even me, because again, I'm very familiar with this material, but it was just the hardness that they were speaking about these human beings. It was beyond disturbing.
Yeah, I too, and I was so, I don't know if sad is the right word, but when there was a couple things where they were like, oh, this particular piece was edited, and somehow every bit of it got debunked because of one little thing, which was really unfortunate, because I remember too looking at those images that were not edited images, that were the real thing, and I remember crying watching those videos too. Yeah. So in the end, even though kind of the media and the left were able to gloss over it in a way and kind of get their story on it, I still think it was a good thing, and I still think that it probably changed some minds. So thanks for giving us your take on that. But one thing that is a positive note here is that it does seem that the country is becoming more pro-life. Polling is showing that. I think we're pretty much split down the middle as far as how people identify, but I read today, and I don't know what the organization was, but that abortions are like down lower than they've been in quite some time, and that people are less and less and less likely to say they believe at abortion at any point in a woman's pregnancy. Do you see things changing for the better right now?
Yeah, I definitely see the younger generation. So many of us, and I've become a millennial recently. They moved the line, so now I'm mentioning millennials. They did, but
I'm an old millennial. I understand.
Yeah, but I'm seeing that the millennial generation, like, they have this rebellious, social justice type spirit, and they want to fight for what's right. And I would say that most of us have that. The golden rule type theory that do unto others as you would have them. And yet, for some reason, we've always made this exception with abortion. And I think it's very strange, again, knowing that these are the most vulnerable human beings. But the really cool thing about young people is they have seen their videos of their 3D sonogram. They have seen themselves in the womb moving around, and I think that type of technology has shown that these human beings, these preborn humans, are very, very real. And I think when mixed with this kind of warrior spirit that so many young activists have, it absolutely becomes a human rights issue. This is a matter of nonviolence. And so it's very cool that people aren't just ideologically saying I'm pro-life, but they're saying I'm going to act on this, and I'm going to get out there and make sure that I am helping women make these choices. So yes, I would completely agree that we're seeing definitely a new wave of activism in America.
Yeah, I've always found it so interesting. The abortion issue has always been tied to the Republican Party. And I guess I don't exactly know why, because to me it doesn't really fit in with all of the other issues, especially when you're right. I totally agree it's a human rights issue. And it seems almost like it would be more of an issue that the left would have picked up somehow.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've said this multiple times in the last few days. I think the most dangerous thing we ever did was make abortion a partisan issue.
Right.
This is a human rights issue. This is something that, like you mentioned, the consistency of one party that believes, they're against war and against the death penalty and truly is very compassionate, when it comes to the born human beings. But then when it comes to abortion, they dispose of them. On the flip side, you have the conservative party that, gets to wear this label of pro-life, and then sometimes they do other things that aren't necessarily consistent with that pro-life ethic. And so I completely agree. I'm seeing a rise in pro-life Democrats, which I think is really cool, because what I've seen happen, and you might disagree with this, but what I've seen happen is because, the GOP owns the pro-life title, you have someone like Mr. Trump, who I don't necessarily know that a lot of people believe he's authentically pro-life. When we listen to his conversion story, it's basically about a friend of his who had an unplanned pregnancy. She ends up choosing life, and the kid's like the real winner, I think is what he calls him now. Like,
yeah.
What
that
if
was a very iffy story.
Yeah, are we okay with it if the kid's a loser? Is abortion suddenly okay? And so, but because he has an R behind his name and he's, quote unquote pro-life, he was able to really mobilize that voter base for him. And I think that's unfair. I think it's unfair that just one party gets to wear the label of pro-life. And I wish that we would see more Democrats that were opposed to abortion and subscribe to the consistent life ethic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, voted out of fear this election, just fear of the other thing being worse. And it was definitely unlike any other election season in the pro-life issue. I mean, I've never believed that Donald Trump has any genuine thoughts on it. I think he's just kind of like, sure, this works because this is what I'm doing now. And
he got elected on that, though. So I do think that now is the time for the pro-life movement to absolutely hold him accountable.
Right, totally.
When it comes to these convictions, whether they are authentic or not.
Right, and I do hope that he, lives up to that. So as you head to the march, which the march is Saturday, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, what is the message of your group heading into the march? Do you have a large group going? Are you meeting up with other pro-lifers?
At this point, I don't know. We were hoping for around 50 people. We have a group called Life Matters Journal that is pro-life feminist. We had the Consistent Life Ethic Network that was going, and then my group, New Wave Feminists. So we were hoping for around 50 people, but now, of course, there has been the spotlight put on the concept of pro-life feminism. It might be bringing out more people. We don't know. But the really cool thing we've actually seen was people contacting us through Facebook saying, hey, is there anybody in Houston? Is there anybody in Tampa? Is there anybody in LA?
Yeah.
And so now these people these women who I think felt kind of marginalized, like this march is not for me, I don't belong here, they've made it clear they don't want pro-lifers. Fortunately, by choosing to drop us as a partner, they've kind of awakened this beast where a lot of people want to get out there and represent the pro-life feminist contingent. And if you think about it, the women who are marching are the very ones that we are trying to reach 365 days a year. So I think it's incredibly important that we get out there and find common ground with them, and don't I'm not comfortable with protesting them. I want to be participating in this march and saying, here are the things that we agree on. So yes, we're going to have signs that say, I'm a pro-life feminist. We have signs that say, Mr. Trump, war is not pro-life. So we're going to be going with the theme of this being something that's going to hold Donald Trump accountable. But at the same time, we are definitely going to be bringing a unique pro-life feminist perspective.
I know I already said it, but I just totally love your perspective. I just don't think enough people are saying the kinds of things that you're saying to where people can actually have conversations. So I think that this has been an awesome, it's not awesome that you guys got excluded, but it's awesome that you're able to have this platform now. And I think people do respect this. I know it's just a sample size for my little Facebook page, but I see when I converse with people on this, what kind of gets through and how the conversations are had. And so I hope that this is the beginning of more conversations,
And
this.
we've gotten a ton of pro-choice support, believe it or not, of people reaching out to us and saying, I am thoroughly pro-choice. I support Planned Parenthood. This is not okay that they cut you out of this. So
right. There was a video from the Daily Signal today. They did a little report, and they had interviewed a woman who was walking around with a Hillary shirt, and she was like, I'm totally pro-choice, but this is wrong. They should have a place at the table.
Dialogue is always good.
Right. Totally agree. Well, I guess that's all I've got for us today. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I know you've got a busy schedule. I heard you say you've been interviewed by Rolling Stone and the New York Times and Fox News, and I'm sure there's a ton more coming your way. So please keep us updated.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have me on today.
And where can we find your organization online and any of your social media?
I would say, Facebook is probably the best way to get a hold of us and really kind of see what we're up to. When we are out at the march, we plan on live streaming quite a bit and, of course, posting tons of pictures that you guys are welcome to share. And so definitely follow us on Facebook this Saturday at New Wave Feminists, plural, or just our website, newwavefeminists.com.
Okay, we're definitely going to post all those links once we go off video. We'll make sure everybody has access to all of that. And thank you so much, Destiny.
Perfect.